Here we go. Shh. First page. Now, I specifically have on here right triangle trigonometry, and that is an important point because of this. When I have right triangles, I use right triangle trigonometry, which is SineCosine. Regular trig and inverse trig. Okay? SineCosine is used for right triangles. If I do not have right triangles, then I don't use SineCosine. I use law of sines or law of cosines. You guys get that? So the clue that I'm using SineCosine is that it's a right triangle. The clue that I'm using law of sines or law of cosines is that it's not a right triangle. Okay? That's an important point. So we start with the most fundamental. I ask the tangent of z. Well, first I identify my angle. That's z right there. And then I say, well, tangent is what ratio? What sides? Opposite over adjacent. So identify those sides. Here's my opposite side. Here's my adjacent side. Therefore, the tangent of z is 21 over 28, or simplifies to 3/4. I'm done. Similar to this is cosine of c. I identify my angle. Cosine is what ratio? What sides? Good, so I identify those sides. Here's my adjacent side. Here's my hypotenuse. Therefore, the cosine of c is adjacent, which is 16, over hypotenuse, which is 34, which simplifies to 8 over 17. And I'm done. Any questions on these ones? Okay, this is about as simple as it gets. There will be questions on the final exam exactly like this. If you want to do it, there you go. Okay. I've also written the final exam in such a way that all the problems are cohesive. I don't mix them up. Okay, so that should make it easier for you to see, okay, I'm using trig here. All the trig problems are together. Okay. Next. They won't be this easy on the final exam, but you will be expected to be able to evaluate sine and cosine with your calculator. This really is as simple as just plugging it into your calculator. Sine of 48 is 0.743. Cosine of 61 is 0.485. Now, you need a calculator. Don't let the final exam day be the day that you experiment with your calculator for the first time. Okay. I may be in the room, but I may not be in the room. I'm not 100% sure yet. And even if I'm in the room, I'm not going to be answering questions on the test. I'll just be proctoring. You know, do you need a pencil? Do you need a calculator? And if you do need a calculator, I'm going to be like,
do you need the answers?
I'll be like this. You'll be like, oh, Mr. Munir, I don't have a calculator. I'll just look at you. I'll just look at you. But then I'll be like, you sly little Lorraine. All right. All right. Okay. I probably wouldn't look at you like that. I'd probably just be like, oy vey. All right. Next. The next kinds that are simple, we start getting a little bit more in depth. Now, I ask you to solve for this side. I may give you x, or I might say it's like side AB or something like that. Either way, you've got to solve for a side. First, you identify your angle. Then you identify the sides you're given. That's opposite, that's adjacent. Which trig ratio uses opposite and adjacent? Tangent. That's very correct. I get the tangent of 25 degrees equals opposite, which is x, over adjacent, which is 10. To solve for x, I get it by itself by multiplying by 10. I end up with x equals 10, tangent of 25. Plug it in my calculator, I get 4.66. Any questions on that? Okay. Next one. Again, I'm asked to solve for a side. I identify my angle. From that angle, I identify my sides. That's opposite. This is opposite the right angle, so that's hypotenuse. Which trigonometric ratio uses opposite and hypotenuse? Sine. Very good. Sine of 46 degrees equals opposite, which is 8 over x. What's the difference between this one and the previous one? X is on the bottom. Now, what you'll see by the end of this is that if I could just swap them, I get the answer. X will just end up being 8 over sine of 46. So if you get something like this, honestly, you can just swap them, bam, x equals 8 over sine of 46. But you can also do the algebra if you don't remember that. You multiply both sides by x. You get x times sine of 46 equals 8. Divide by sine of 46. And you end up with exactly that. X equals 8 over sine of 46, or 11.1. Any questions on that one? Okay. All right. Next page. Now, for these, I'm asked to solve for an angle measure. Whenever I am solving for an angle, I use what kind of trig? Inverse trig. Let's all say that together. When I solve for an angle, I use inverse trig. Okay, one more time. When I solve for an angle, I use inverse trig. Inverse trig. I love you, inverse trig. Just get an inverse trig t-shirt. When I solve for an angle, I use inverse trig. All right? So in this case, I've got sine of b equals 0.4848. In that case, b then equals the inverse sine of 0.4848. Which is approximately 29 degrees. Go ahead and find number 3 on your own. If cosine of A equals 0.7431, then A equals the inverse cosine of 0.7431. Which is 42 degrees. Simple as that. Any questions? Okay. Now, once you've got that, we can apply that. How can we apply this? Well, if we're asked to solve for an angle in a triangle, we have to use what?
Inverse trig.
Inverse trig, because we're solving for an angle. So I identify my angle, and then I identify my sides. This is hypotenuse. This is adjacent. Which trig ratio uses adjacent and hypotenuse? Cosine. So theta equals the inverse cosine. You see why that memory trigger helps you? Solving for an angle, inverse. Okay, so now I just set it up. Theta equals inverse cosine of 12 over 13. One step. Theta equals 22.62 degrees. And I'm done. Go ahead and solve for number 2 on your own. Okay. Identify my angle. Use that to identify my sides. That's opposite. That's adjacent. Which trig ratio uses opposite and adjacent? Tangent. Theta equals the inverse tangent of opposite, which is 4 over adjacent, which is 13. So theta equals, plug it in the calculator, inverse tangent of 4 over 13 is 17.1 degrees. And I'm done. Any questions on that? Okay. Now, I will say to you, there will be word problems. And you will be expected to, from a word problem, draw a diagram. Okay? What's the key? If you're in the trigonometry section and you're asked to draw a picture, or you're just asked to solve for something and they don't give you a picture, make sure you draw a right triangle. Don't draw something crazy, draw a right triangle. You know that's going to be the case. You know you're going to have a right triangle. Hello, Mr. Sir.
Chapel.
Fabulous job at chapel today, sir. Thank you for leading us in worship. Do you need a packet? Yeah, you got it? Okay. All right. Now, we march into law of sines. How do I know that this is not SOHCAHTOA stuff here?
Because there's no right triangles.
No right triangles. No right triangles, so I immediately know that I'm either using law of sines or law of cosines. Everybody do yourselves a favor here. Cross out 118 right there and just write in 40 degrees here. Okay? Just make this problem a little easier to see and understand. How do I know? Now, I know I'm using law of cosines or law of sines because I don't have a right triangle. The question is, how do I know I'm using law of sines? Well, I know I'm using law of sines when I have two sets of angles and opposite side pairs. What does that mean? I've got this angle and its opposite side. You see? 40 degrees, that angle, and this opposite side. And then I have this angle, and I'm looking for AC, so that's the opposite side. So you see what I mean? I have two pairs, this pair and that pair, the red pair and the blue pair. Two pairs of angles and their opposite sides, use law of sines. Got it? What is the law of sines? The law of sines is side over sine. So A over sine of A equals side over sine, B over sine of B. You will have to memorize this. There are 4 formulas that you will have to memorize for this exam. Law of sines, law of cosines, and then the 2 area formulas when you're solving a triangle, solving for the area of a triangle. First one here is law of sines. It's just side over sine equals side over sine. Okay? How do I apply that in this case? I do x over the sine of 22 equals 24 over the sine of 40. The side over the sine of the angle equals the side over the sine of the angle. And I keep them in the opposite pairs. Okay? To solve for x, I multiply by sine of 22 on both sides. And I get x equals 24 times sine of 22 divided by sine of 40, which is approximately 14. Does that make sense?
Sir.
All right, everybody do number 2. Do that on your own. side AB. Again, how do you know it's law of sines? You have an angle and its opposite side, and an angle and you're solving for side AB, its opposite side. Yes, sir. Yep. Actually, it's probably better to just go now. Because you've already seen this, rather than, because I don't want you to miss law of cosines. Okay, let's take a look. I have the angle, the opposite side, angle, and the opposite side. Tell their opposite sides by just drawing these like arrows. You see? Okay. How do I solve? I do the side, x, over the sine of the angle, equals the side, 7, over the sine of 44 degrees. Multiply both sides by sine of 53. Cancels that out. I end up with x equals 7 times sine of 53 divided by sine of 49, which is 7.4. Sine of 44, that's, sorry. Should have been sine of 44. Should be 8.05. Any questions? Got to memorize that formula. Okay, if I were you guys, I'd be doing flashcards. You write enough of those flashcards, you just write them a bunch, test yourself, you know, drill it into your long-term memory, do it over a few days' time. The way to ingrain something in memory is to not try and cram it all in at once. The way to ingrain something in a memory is to repeat it a few times over a long period of time, like multiple times, right? So like write 3 flashcards, set it aside. Wake up the next morning, do it the next day, write another 3 flashcards. You know, by the time you get to the exam, it'll be ingrained in your long-term memory because you'll be drawing it back up. All right? So that's what I recommend for these. Next, good timing, sir. Law of cosines. Law of cosines. Again, how do I know that I'm not using SineCosine for these triangles? They are not right triangles. Since they are not right triangles, I cannot use SineCosine, which triggers me to say it's law of sines or law of cosines. Only question is which one. I don't have 2 angles and opposite sides here, so I know it's not law of sines. But how do I know that it is law of cosines?
2 sides.
2 sides and the angle in between them. 2 sides and the angle in between them. That's how I know I'm doing law of cosines. Now, let's give it a look. What is the law of cosines formula? It's a squared equals b squared plus c squared minus 2bc cosine of a. Okay. In these questions, once you've memorized the formula, you're basically done with this question because You'll see it's just all calculator. So let's do the first one. This side is always the side I'm searching for. I'm looking for AB, so that's x. X squared equals 13 squared plus 29 squared. I could put them in any order, doesn't matter. 13 and 29 are interchangeable. Minus 2 times 13 times 29 times the cosine of the angle in between them. Okay? What do? Plug it all in my calculator. 13 squared plus 29 squared minus 2 times 13 times 29 times cosine of 41. Okay? X squared equals 441. You see why memorizing the equation you're basically done? Because then you're just plugging it into your calculator. So you have to memorize this.
Can I give one hint?
Yes, please.
Where's your stylus?
Right here.
Right on the screen?
Right here.
Oh,
It's kind of a little different. Yeah. You kind of just got to place it down.
Okay.
There you go.
Oh, wait. I
That's
didn't
all
know.
right.
I meant if you guys will put this part in parentheses, it'll keep you from making a careless mistake. Okay, now where's the eraser? I want to try it. How do I pick up the eraser?
Oh, you have to. Here, you go here.
Yeah.
Click on that one.
Oh.
That one. And then hold it and then click there. Yep, there you go.
Okay, hold on. I have to. Not there, ladies and gentlemen.
There you go. Nice.
Put parentheses around that last term because that's where people make a careless mistake. Because
Very
they
good.
subtract before they multiply.
That's true. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Hendry. All right. Cool. So that's a good point. And like when you're plugging it into your calculator, fortunately, your calculator knows the order of operations.
Now
It might not now, but it does. So you can just plug it in your calculator. You got the answer. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah.
Okay, what do I do now? Square root. And I get x equals 21. You guys see that? All right, go ahead and do number 2. Do number 2.
Yeah, my calculator broke.
It happens.
I already broke a calculator. Actually, no, I used the same calculator from freshman year to senior year without changing any of that. It's not this one. This year, I broke it. Literally, I was using it in the middle of like one of the tests.
I know it's bad.
I used my calculator. I tried to use my calculator. Yeah, my mind like broke. Like the screen literally went error and then black. And I was like, what the heck? And it just didn't work. That was Old Faithful. Old Faithful. And I know how to use that thing like since no middle school I even changed it, but it was the same model. Was it
TI-86?
I don't know. All I know is it was blue. And it was Texas Instruments, but like the yellow. No, it was like it was blue with the yellow inside. Yeah.
Okay.
Is it the 86?
You guys got the answer yet? You're still working. Shh. You guys got it? Working?
Oh, reliable.
It's almost there. It's just the opposite sides.
You ever just like TV?
Okay.
Ask him some year if you got it.
Again, it's not a right triangle. 2 sides and an angle between them. Law of cosines. All right. I'm solving for this side here, BC. So I get x squared equals 21 squared plus 30 squared minus 2, 21, 30 cosine of the angle between them. I plug it into my calculator. I get 21 squared plus 30 squared minus 2 times 21 times 30 times the cosine of 123, the angle between them. And I get 2027. To solve for x, finally, I take the square root of both sides. I get x equals the square root of 2027, or approximately 45. Any questions on that? Again, you do have to memorize this equation. Once you've memorized it, you're basically done with this problem. Okay, moving on. Area of triangles. This is the third formula you have to memorize. The third of 4. Finding the area of triangles. Let's all pay attention. Let's make sure we're focused. Let's focus. Focus our minds. Focus. Focus. Let's focus. Okay. There are 2 versions, or 2 forms of finding the area of a triangle. Girls, you don't see that. It's okay. I always find you 2 in the moment, right? And I point it out. Let's pick on you guys. It's not fair. You should write a letter. Just kidding. Really, it's these guys that are constantly like.
Mr. Manero.
All right.
Look at all the work.
Very good. All right. Now, there are 2, listen carefully. There are 2 different ways of finding the area of a triangle. Both have their own formulas. The first way is when I have 2 sides and the angle in between them. You see? 2 sides and angle in between them. When I have 2 sides and the angle in between them, I use this formula. Area equals 1/2 AB sine of C, the angle between them. So it's very simple. Area is 1/2 11 times 11. The order of the sides doesn't matter. Times the sine of the angle in between them. So it's 0.5 times 11 times 11 times the sine of the angle in between them. And you get area equals 59.8 centimeters squared. Okay, simple as that. Everybody go ahead and do number 26.
Doesn't matter which one's bigger.
Doesn't. You can do the sides in any order.
It's just as long as C is there.
C is always to be there. Please. Okay, let's take a look. Area equals 1/2 7.6 times 6.7. Either of those could have been first. Times the sine of the angle in between them. I get 1/2 7.6 times 6.7 times the sine of the angle in between them. I get 11.95. You guys got that? All right. Any questions? That's pretty good. All right. Last thing, and then we're done. You guys have free time, or you guys can work on this packet, which is what I would suggest. You can ask me questions on logarithms, whatever. Want to get ahead? All right. Now, the final formula to memorize, 4 of 4, is finding the area of a triangle when you've got all 3 sides. Before we do anything else, cross out 7.5, make that 10. Cross out 14, make that 15. Okay? You're just changing the dimensions of those sides because I want to make the problem more easy to understand. Now, notice I don't have 2 sides and angles between them. I have all 3 sides. I'm asked to solve for the area. How do I do that? Well, I use the fourth formula, which is this. The semi-perimeter S equals A plus B plus C over 2. You add up all the sides and divide by 2. And then the area equals the square root of S times S minus A times S minus B times S minus C. Okay? Simple as that. So for number 1, what does that look like? Well, S equals 8 plus 10 plus 14 over 2, which is 32 over 2, which is 16. Once I've got S, I can plug it into my formula for area, which is 16 times 16 minus 8 times 16 minus 10 times 16 minus 14. Okay. Simplify. You guys got this?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Becomes 16 times 8 times 6 times 2. Plug that in the calculator. 16 times 8 times 6 times 2 is 1536. A is the square root of 1536, which is 39.2 inches squared. Okay? Now everybody go ahead and do number 2. And that's it. Once you get this done, we'll explain it, and we'll be done with our review for the day. Okay, first step, you find S. S equals 13 plus 14 plus 15 over 2. 13 plus 14 is 27, plus 15 is 42, over 2 is 21. Once I've got that, I plug it into my area formula, which is 21 times 21 minus 13 times 21 minus 14 times 21 minus 15. Simplify that, I get the square root of 21 times 8 times 7 times 6, which equals the square root of 21 times 8 times 7 times 6 is 7056. Square root of 7056 is 84 on the dot. Pretty cool. Any questions on that?
It's pretty simple.
Yes, 84 centimeters squared. Exactly. Thank you. Isaiah, question? No? Good. Any questions at all? Okay. Very good, class. Good job. Now, before I lose you, listen. Listen to me. Shh. It's one thing to sit in class and listen to the review and follow along. It's another thing to study on your own. Make sure you're putting in the time to study on your own for this test. You have every reason to get an A on this. This packet, I basically wrote the exam kind of off this packet. Okay? There's very little in the exam that's not in this packet. But if you're not understanding things, don't just use this packet. Don't just think that you can do 2 problems in class and you got it. You need more practice. Okay? Either go online, Google the law of sines, law of cosines, watch a video, get practice problems, ask me for more practice, go in your book, get more practice, whatever you need, but make sure you're studying. Review your tests. Yes, sir. It's going to be 35 multiple choice in a row, and 5 free response right at the very end. And then 1 bonus question. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Any other questions? Nope. All right. Good job, class. Good job.